I mean,
I
we'll
never
see.
know how to start or end these interviews.
It's a bit like jumping out of an airplane for me. So it's like,
it is.
My first jump wasn't that great either.
Well, yeah.
I passed
certain
out.
things in life you can just never be trained for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Heather, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was a true pleasure to get to meet you at CrimeCon. Thank you so much for coming up to me and introducing yourself and sharing your son's story. We have been trying to get this coordinated for, I guess it's been about 2 months now. And I'm glad that we're finally able to have you and Caleb's story be shared with the world so that we can try to help prevent what happened to him happen to so many other soldiers. As I was doing some research for this podcast, it shocked me to learn just how many non-combat deaths occur in our military. I would have thought that the numbers were inverse, but in actuality, only 25% of military deaths are combat related and 75% are non-combat related. And so, I think we kind of talked about this offline, where if something happens once, it's an anomaly. If something happens twice, maybe it's a coincidence. But if something happens a third, a fourth, a fifth time, that's a pattern in practice. And if you don't want that pattern to continue, you have to change something, or else you can bet your bottom dollar that it is going to happen again. And when you see those numbers as staggering as they are, and when you hear the story as tragic as your son's was, you really wonder how this is allowed to continue and why something has not been done about it to this point. And I would like you to maybe start with sharing Caleb's story, and then we can get into, what can you and I do and the audience do to kind of help you to help others prevent this from happening to their sons, their fathers, their daughters, their mothers. Here, who's protecting our protectors?
Yeah, beautifully said. Who is protecting our protectors? And that's the ultimate question. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to get to the bottom of, that's a beautiful, I love how you said that, because that's exactly how Caleb felt. He wanted to be a protector. He was my little man. I was a single mother. Caleb was a very unique kid in the fact that he grew up in government housing, in the projects, because I was a single mom. I had some physical abuse in my family, and I had to exit stage left, and go find my way. And so my own personal story and Caleb's story is it's unique, but there's a lot of us out there. And I hope that maybe we can, other people will identify with our story. I just really thank you for letting me tell a story, because I just, think it's important for people to hear how Caleb was let down, and his dreams and goals. He looked at folks like you, Spencer, and he was like, I want to be a protector. I want to take care of my family. Caleb was always trying to take care of me, and he loved taking care of people. I guess I'm kind of the same way. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 18 years. And so he just saw me working with my special ed kids. He'd go with me to, our Special Olympics, and he helped coach, and he loved to help people. And, I know it seems kind of biased, but it's when you hear from so many people, the stories that I've heard over the last year and a half of his compassion towards other battle buddies and his classmates and family. He was a genuine friend and showed people what brotherly love was really feels like, you know?
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of stories I could tell you, you know, about his character.
I see his photo above you. I believe, is that his uniform behind you?
It is.
The flag as well. Was being a soldier something he always wanted to do?
Actually, yes. Do you mind if I show you a quick picture?
No, please.
I'm gonna just stand up here. I'm glad you asked that. This is a picture of, I think he's like he was 4 or 5 years old.
Kind of hold it back a little bit.
Better?
Otherwise, I'm just seeing myself as a reflection of the screen, but right where you're holding it there is perfect.
Is that better? Can you see the flag in the background?
I can, yes.
Smile? Like, I have pictures of him when he's this age and younger, just looking up at the flag as we're putting it up outside the house, you know, just like and idolized the soldiers. And he's all, you know, he always had a fascination for trackline vehicles, and he loved like backhoes. He was like the first trackline vehicle he you know, idolized as a kid. And so it's kind of interesting that he became a 91 Lima, I think, you know, mechanic. He was so proud to be a 91 Lima trackline mechanic, and he was so proud to be 82nd Airborne, man. I mean, like, are you kidding me?
I was
had to one up me a little bit.
I spent a great many years at Fort Bragg. So he joined right after high school. Is that correct? He
joined right after high school. He wanted to go in, of course, you know, all these young dudes, they want to go in, have you sign away, you know, so they can go in at, you know, 17. And I'm like, Caleb, look, dude, all of your friends love you. You have great life at high school. You are a track star. You love running. You love people. Like, enjoy this year. And so he kind of rolled his eyes at me and he was like, okay, fine, you know. And so he enjoyed, you know, hanging out with his friends his senior year, but he was so eager to go in. He went to Fort Leonard Wood, and he was, it was challenging. He went through some challenges there, you know, rolled his ankle right off the bus, you know, had to lace up his boot and just be a big boy, learned how, you know, to eat everything on his plate, not complain about anything. So when he got home, he was just like, I was like, hey, you like that sauce, huh? He's like, oh, yeah, Mama, I'll eat anything now.
Yeah, I had never even seen a grit until I got off the bus at Fort Benning. And then I was like, I'm not going to eat these. And they were like, yes, you are.
Yeah, you
are.
And
then
when you're going to eat them with your feet,
that you're living in a caloric deficit for the next 6 months, you will eat literally anything you can find that
you should have seen me as a little beginning Army mom, like going through basic training. I was like reading up on everything. I was watching all these videos. Caleb was sending me stuff, you know. I mean, like, I was so proud of him. I am proud of him. I mean, I feel like he did get his next promotion in a strange way. I'm going to continue to carry the torch of his life, a beautiful light that went out way too soon. But hopefully we can change some of the cultures that have begun, I feel like that have begun to creep up over, you know, like the progression of like, after you know, you're a veteran, you know, I think we spoke about you being like 20 years ago or whatever over at Fort.
Yeah, I got out in 2004. So
yeah, so like there's some significant changes that have taken place. I've had veterans come up to me and say, this isn't, you know, cry and say, this isn't the Army I know. And I tell you what, I love the Army so much that my heart broke so bad in so many thousands of pieces over this, because Caleb really believed that he was a member of a team. And
right,
it, you know, he was let down. I mean, what happened to him should have never happened.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what happened. So he goes to
Absolutely.
he goes through basic, he goes through his AIT, or I guess it was his advanced training. I don't know if it's AI,
Yes.
it's not, is it AIT? Is it
AIT.
okay? Oh, and
Yeah.
advanced individual training. I
Individual
thought
training.
for a second I was
Yeah.
going back to my infantry, which
Right. Well,
any I is infantry. So I was like, it wasn't
right.
advanced infantry training. I was like, oh no, it's
Right.
advanced
And that's not
individual training.
infantry.
That's
Right.
but that's just
Right.
us being stubborn.
Um,
But then he
right.
gets to his unit because he was only in the Army for.
He was in the Army for less than 8 months. He was at Fort Bragg for 7 weeks and 4 days. And that was his final duty station.
Right.
And that was his first duty station. And he was so excited. The last day I ever saw him was on Thanksgiving Day. I dropped him off at the airport in Dallas. We drove up from Lubbock to Dallas, and I dropped him off there at the airport. And that was the most amazing, memorable time. Just getting to be around
I
his
remember the very
personality.
first time I drove through those gates. I want to say it's on Yadkin, but it may not be Yadkin. But it says like home of the airborne and the special operations community. And you're like, all right,
yeah.
let's go do it for real.
Yeah, he said he got there, and what was so lovely about it is that he came in on Thanksgiving Day, and there was a gentleman that noticed that he was in uniform. Caleb was always so proud of wearing his uniform. In fact, the whole time he was here for hometown recruiting, between when he graduated from airborne school and when he was headed to Fort Bragg, he was here for hometown recruiting, and you couldn't get the kid to take off that uniform. He was so proud to wear it. You know, he would have eventually enjoyed wearing civilian clothes again. I think he was just so proud,
Yeah, no, every
old.
soldier goes through that. It's, you know what I mean?
It was really precious.
It's like every cop, as soon as they get their badge and gun, they don't ever want to leave it anywhere but on their person.
And isn't that beautiful? You want it to be that way.
I remember my first time in uniform, and I remember the first time I got credentials. I was like, you just keep looking at it and you can't believe they're real.
Right.
It's
exactly.
a pretty exhilarating experience.
I did that.
So then he's with his unit, and then something happens.
Yeah, he's working overtime with the 2nd Brigade combat team. The 1st Brigade was about to come back in. They were about to employ back in, and 2nd Brigade was about to head out. And Caleb had just gotten there, so he was going to be on the D. What do they call it? The D rear detachment, right?
Yes.
He's the rear detachment. So, but he's still on standby, and he's so
right. He's on a readiness level.
Yeah, he's just so excited, and he and I are talking about that. He's like, "Mom, I probably won't get to go." I love it. Get to go. I probably won't get to go. Not have to go, but get to go.
Yeah, well,
he would have gone, and he would have been.
Which
he was just
rotation
so
it is.
eager and excited, to be a part of that brotherhood, sisterhood, that the patriots.
Of course.
And so he's just working overtime, and then there's a some people say it was the 9th of January, and some say the 13th of January that he hit his head on the track line vehicle. It's called a deuce.
Mm-hmm.
When I spoke to his lieutenant about this personally, he told me that the way it is set up is that the radiator tracks up at a 45-degree angle, and the engine block is over here, like underneath. And he had his head sandwiched between the engine block and the radiator. And that day he just kept hitting the back of his head, kept coming out of it wrong and hitting the back of his head. And it's just strange though, because like when Caleb told me that he hit his head was on the 13th of January. So it's just like, he did a Snapchat that day. These
Mhm.
kids are into Snapchats, and the interesting thing about Snapchats is they disappear. So they'll see it. So they saw Caleb wearing his goggles, his night vision goggles. And he said something about having had a concussion. Nobody snaps that picture, to save it, of course, and it just disappears. But that was on, like the 13th of January.
And several days later, he's found dead.
He hits his head. He goes to the ER 3 times. The third time he goes in, they do a CAT scan. And during that CAT scan, they notice that he has a sinus. I'll just read. I have this I was just reading this earlier today. The few reports I have received only have led me to draw conclusions and raise only more questions. The lack of transparency and the growing mountain of missing information and facts causes me to question the integrity and accountability of those responsible. My son's autopsy report subsequently ruled his death as meningitis, something that he had a required vaccine for and that could have been treated had correct medical procedure been followed. Symptoms of this were seen in the medical records and on the CT scan. But why was this overlooked or neglected? Why isn't anyone held accountable for ensuring safety, treatment, and follow-up? Why are, why are the lives of our children, brothers, sisters, husbands, and wives not valued enough to demand change in this fallen system?
Yeah, and in reading the report, it also seemed as though he had been left unaccounted for several days, where had he been checked on, those symptoms would have been quite obvious, and he could have gotten the care he needed.
He could have gotten the care he needed, or if worst case scenario, at least they could have called me and I could have flown up there and been by his side, because my son died in agony in his room by himself with nobody, with hundreds of thousands of people all around him that could have helped him.
And what excuse did they give for why he was left unaccounted for, unchecked on for that many days?
They didn't really give an excuse.
Because one of the things the military champions is redundancy. There's not just a plan, there's a backup plan. The backup plan has a backup plan. There's a contingency plan, there's a tertiary plan, there's an emergency plan. The military is a two, one is none and two is one. Cut twice, measure twice, cut once. So I don't understand
protective measure. It's
right.
How can you trust these folks again in a real battle or situation if they're, because
it wasn't like he was in a hotel room downtown or in off base housing.
No,
he was
had
in
a
his
roommate.
Barracks, in his room, in his bunk.
Yes, sir. And his roommate is spraying Febreze in the room because it stinks, and to cover up the dead body smell. I mean, how do you not know what something dead smells like?
Yeah.
There are reports of there being sounds in his room the night before, but his body obviously was clearly deceased before that. He was in the 5th stage of decomposition. He was putrefied and his hands were mummified. And I mean, let me just tell you, Spencer, I have seen things I should not see, but I have had to see them, and I've made myself embrace them so that I can call bluff on a few things that I can feel it. There's something not right about this situation. And I just want the truth. And what I'm getting is, I'm sorry for your loss. And we let you down and we are sorry. This is what we are going to do to change.
And what are they saying they're going to do to change? Because when you see that 75% of military deaths are non-combat related, and sadly many of those are suicides, but many of them are homicides. Many more are accidents.
That's right.
And while I could classify your son's death as accidental, in that, like, if the meningitis came from like hitting his head or something like that, the true cause of death was neglect, ignorance, and apathy, because those who were supposed to do their job did not, and those who were supposed to inspect what they expect shirked their responsibility.
Yes,
because it seems from in the report that I read that his sergeant had been sent to a leadership school during that so it was a 4-day weekend, right? Which is when this happened. So he went to the hospital on, say, a Wednesday, right? And then went to the first sergeant, and then they sent him to the hospital. He came back the next morning. He was black and blue with the reports of him wearing his goggles, because I'm guessing it was due to light sensitivity, which is a clear symptom of meningitis. And then he went to bed Friday. So Friday, there was I'm assuming the 4-day weekend was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He misses formation Tuesday morning. And then
he did. It's actually, let me look here.
Heather, if you have it, started to chime in. Leader was to conduct checks and welfare checks throughout the weekend. As of Thursday, January 16th, he was required to do that. And what the AR-15-6 concluded is that there was no standard protocol in place to check on the injured soldier prior to this.
I find that shocking, because there is most certainly the military is of all the things the military is lacking, policy and procedure isn't one of them.
I'm kind of also waiting to release the pictures of Caleb in his casket, which is just, it's just a uniform laid on top of a body, laid on top of something, a mound. It's he's wrapped in a body bag in plastic, and then wrapped in wool, and pinned to specifications. And so, like,
his medals were pinned to
no, like safety pins to hold the wool blanket around the body bag. So he's wrapped in a body bag and wool. That was, and then
the casket was open.
And on top of that was his uniform. They only opened the casket for me.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so in that moment, that was such a horrifying moment, private moment, where the young soldier airborne soldier that traveled with Caleb from the 82nd. I mean, these guys, you gotta be brave to listen to a mother scream in agony, cry, like, and stand there at attention and like take it. And then me ask, like, what is this and what is that on his uniform, and what does that stand for?
Right.
And this young man steps up and he does his duty, and he says what they all mean, and then he steps back just like a gentleman, and he does his job. And I know there are amazing commands out there. I know I've heard from a lot of them who want to let me know and reassure me that they're doing their best to maintain the health, just the well-being, of their soldiers. And that makes me happy.
Right.
But I still, like, there's a culture, I feel like, that has kind of been created here that needs to be needs to be snuffed out.
Well, I don't disagree. The very first podcast I did was, talking about the Vanessa Guillen murder at Fort Hood, where the Army for months claimed that there was no foul play, that she was considered AWOL, that, they had no reason to believe that this was the result of any kind of insider threat or soldier on soldier action, even though she had clearly, made sexual harassment reports against the soldier who ultimately killed her. And when you see the military shirking the responsibility of their soldiers, because, like when you're in combat, one of the reasons that soldiers are, I wouldn't say eager to give their, what's the old Patton quote? Like, the war isn't about dying for your country, it's about making some other son of a bitch die for his. But the reason we're willing to take such risks is because we know that if we get hurt or injured, we will be immediately cared for and looked after. And when you see stories like what happened to Vanessa Guillen, and when you hear stories about like what happened to your son, it lowers the morale of those around those individuals, because the immediate takeaway is, well, if it happened to them, it can happen to me. If no one's checking on him, who's going to check on me when I get sick?
That's right.
And when we started this with, who's protecting our protectors, it's very easy when you're overseas to take things seriously, but policy and procedure only work when you follow them every time. And outside of, say, law enforcement, not following those policies and procedures usually results in someone's death. And when the military, of which I was proud to serve and, consider, my service honorable, look at this negligence and this complacency and the shirking of responsibility and say something must be done, because it's happening too often. These are, whether it's the mental health concern or whether it's the physical health, welfare, and well-being of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, air persons, Marines, then something must be done. So as you are taking up this torch to carry forward for Caleb, what does winning look like for you? How can we help you to ensure that something like this doesn't happen to another military member?
Well, I want to say that I have the answer. But honestly, I really need help from, I don't know all of the answers that there are as far as what to do. I can tell you, please lead with integrity, please lead with empathy as a leader. I need we the people to listen and to take note of what's happening across our military bases. The way we treat our soldiers is a barometer for the state of our country. How we're protecting our protectors is a barometer for just the health and the well-being and the state of our country. And I just want them to have the ability to do their job, to not die on their own territory. I think that they sign up to do a job that only 1% of our nation will do and chooses to do. They choose to lay
less
down
than
their
1%.
life. What's that?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
but
so,
when you see things like, because I know how the military works, and they're going to say things like, well, we have the you know, the airborne creed, and we have the NCO creed, and we have the military creed, and we have all of these creeds that say we're going to be the best and look after the best and do the right thing. But the reality is that actions speak louder than words.
That's right. These jobs have a culture of integrity for years. And this is the Army. And y'all are held, you know, to a certain standard, a higher standard. And that's the norm. And they're going,
but I know, like, even with that Vanessa Guillen case, like,
own values.
They weren't, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to step on.
They're going against their own values of integrity.
Yes.
And the values of the Army. And it doesn't mean anything if you don't live it.
Well, not only that, but like transparency is its own legitimacy.
Absolutely.
It should not take Selma Hayek having to go onto social media to demand justice for Vanessa Guillen. It shouldn't take you having to come onto this podcast to ask for help in getting legislation changed or getting an inspector general to do an audit of the policies and procedures. Like, for them to say that there was no policy and procedure in place to check on a sick soldier is
ridiculous.
I'm going to say bullshit.
Yes.
And if it isn't, it's disgraceful, neglectful, and abhorrent, and should be remedied immediately.
You know, we must come to a resolution before we cave in on ourselves. The military must be held accountable for those weak links, and to stand by and allow this to continue will cause the implosion that, you know, completely negates the purpose of the military. Independent investigations is the solution, and to discovering and depleting our system failures.
So
you know?
how can people get in touch with you? How can they reach out to you to help? Are there other, you know, Gold Star families who are in similar circumstance, or whose sons or daughters or brothers or sisters or mothers or fathers have died through similar circumstances of neglect and ignorance? And
absolutely, you know, Vanessa Guillen, you know, her death and what her family has done has opened the door, kind of cracked the door for us Gold Star families who have soldiers who have died under these mysterious circumstances, and or just, you know, under non-combat deaths. You know, the reason I'm speaking, you know, out about all this is because, you know, I've just met so many Gold Star families and soldiers over the last year and a half who have not been heard, and who have had their loved ones die under these non-combat deaths. You know, but some of us have been waiting, you know, for 2 decades. You know, I think about Lavina Johnson, and she's like, it's 2005, and then Tina Priest in 2006, and Kamisha Block, like I said, murder-suicide in 2007. And, you know, where they just try to say, cover up and say, you know, like Lavina Johnson, she shot herself with a long gun.
sounds suspicious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of suspicious weirdness about that. But I mean, you know, I am fighting for my son, like, so that other families don't have to go through this kind of torture. I mean, to learn, first of all, that you dropped your son off on Thanksgiving Day, and 7 weeks later, you have 2 beautifully decorated soldiers show up on your front porch at 6 o'clock in the morning, banging on your door. There's so much PTSD. Like, I get it. Like, I can't imagine. I have had to see so many things I cannot unsee. I've seen autopsy photos. I've seen the picture of my son laying in his room. You know, you can't unsee certain things, and it affects you. And it's like a bomb goes off. And yeah, like when you find another family that has gone through your specific brand or type of hurt, from like trusting and believing in a military and a brotherhood, sisterhood that has failed and let you down and your family down and your soldier down, you get this influx, this tsunami of families. You hear their stories, you hear, I mean, it gives me the chills, honestly. It breaks my heart, and I don't want another family to go through this kind of pain. Finding out your son is so decomposed that he can't be viewable at his funeral. At his funeral, he's too decomposed that he can't be viewed as his funeral. I mean, his sister, I had to tell his sister, no, I'm sorry, you'll never see your brother again. She was 13. And you know what she did, Spencer? She cut her arms up.
To displace the pain.
And I had to walk her through all this. And she, even to this day, like, she doesn't, it's hard for her to, this is too much for her. All this, everything that I'm doing is too much. She can't handle it. Her friends going to school. Oh, you're Smitty's sister, and it's just, she didn't go to school all last year.
Is she talking to someone? Is she able to get the help that she needs?
She is getting the help that she needs. It took us a while to help her through this.
What are you doing to help yourself? How can we help you?
Well, I'll tell you, it would be really nice if there's anybody out there that knows how to create a website or brand or do anything like that. I'm just one person, and I'm just trying to hold up my justice flag for my son, but for our soldiers, for my veterans. I see a lot of things. I hear a lot of things. What you can do for me, I mean, I'm going to the VA counseling center, and I really love that place. My counselor is amazing. I can be translucent with her and tell her how I feel, and kind of get the feedback that I need to help navigate me through this very difficult, I don't want to say time, because it's not going to just be a difficult time. It's now and forever a walk. It's a ruck. And sometimes it feels like free climbing. And so, like, anybody that knows anything about like how to get a hold of President Trump, about how to, I mean, the very first thing that I knew to do was to call my congressman. But actually, my congressman ended up calling me instead. He heard about what had happened, the fact that Caleb's body wasn't going to be home for a whole 3 weeks. And he was able to send out, a letter on my behalf, or whatever, to make a call on my behalf to find out what we could do to get his body here sooner.
And if you could get hold of President Trump or President Biden or a state senator or someone of real political, or a Colin Powell, or someone of legitimate influence with our military, what would your ask be?
Well, I'm making a stance by asking, our president, just to please help us reform the military. Please rejuvenate the system. So that our soldiers.
Perhaps you could phrase that in such a way that it would be to inspect what you expect, to make sure that what happened to my son doesn't happen to anyone else.
So reform our military.
So if you say reform our military, that could mean everything from like defense spending to budget cuts to better food in the chow hall. But if you say, I want to see non-combat military deaths go from the majority to the minority, that's a takeaway.
Yeah.
If
So
I want to, if I want them to, I want them to do I want to see an audit done so that, you know, that what they expect to take place is actually what's happening, because words are one thing, but actions are another. There has to be a, what is the, the campaign bullet point line on a web, like on your website for Caleb, it should say, what is the call to action? What is it that could really be a tangible, employable, practical, promotable message that could be shared on social media, that could be a rally, but if you just say like reform the military, it's like saying, oh, I want to fix, I want to clean the ocean. Well, there's a billion ways to do that. I mean, so when I talk about like, tending to the part of the garden you can touch, do you want to see an audit of Fort Bragg done to make sure that this doesn't happen to any more airborne? Do you want to see this done to, you know what I mean? Do you want mothers who are mothers to have more of a voice in, should they have more of a platform? Should there be more? So like what?
Well, I mean, I would say that I would love to see an audit done over Fort Bragg. I would love to see an audit done on the Womack Army Medical Center. Let's find the weak link. So that we
well, honestly, like, and I could be completely wrong, but I don't think that the issue, what I see as the overwhelming culpability in your son's death is not the medical center. It is his unit who did not check on him as they were supposed to, because basically it seems to me that the sergeant whose ultimate job it was to look after the health and welfare of his soldiers got sent away, and there was no clear next man up. He kind of like went to the specialist and said, hey, make sure you check on this guy while I'm gone, but it wasn't an official order. There was no policy and procedure in place. And then the specialist went, yeah, okay, Sarge, and like went about his day. And then when asked later if he checked on him, he was like, yeah, he's fine. Yeah. And then it wasn't until he was furloughed,
So like, what is that? Like an audit of the command itself, like an audit of the whole base? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think it could be a lot of things. I think that it's still kind of ridiculous that with all of the tech that the military has, that, they're still doing phone logs by hand, that there is no, I mean, if your entire medical record can be, on the swipe card of I'm sorry, if your entire medical history can be, imprinted into the metadata of your ID card, where is the technology that says, hey, here's the call log, here's the check-in, here's, if we have a sick soldier, who's checking on him every 8 hours to make sure he has the food, the water, the vitamins, the care that he needs.
Yeah.
Because if it's at a certain point to a degree where it's not worth having him hospitalized, like, you should still be checked on. Like if I know a friend of mine has the flu, I'm calling them or checking in on them every couple hours. Hey, what do you need? What can I get you? I mean, especially, like a lot of my friends are still bachelors who maybe we have a dog, but the dog's not going to get you chicken noodle soup.
I mean, so how can you, like, I kind of think like, it's not just my duty I need help from everyone to make sure, to ensure that the safety and the well-being of their soldiers are the utmost importance, and that the chain is a real chain that really is linked and solid. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a way to test that.
Yeah, or maybe it's legislation to change that you can't sue the military except in cases of medical malpractice. That you could also sue the military in instances of neglect or incompetence.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
But if I could too,
sure.
One of the biggest issues here is that we have a CID investigation, a command investigation, an AR-15-6 investigation. Throughout all of these investigations, we have misstatements about what was done to check on Caleb. We have that are in writing, provided by various levels of the command, from a specialist up to the captain, yet there's no action taken for those failures. And they put it in writing that, people did not do what they were supposed to do, and they lied to CID. And what came out of that was that somebody got non-judicial punishment for their, dereliction of their duties in that. And that's the lowest level person that got that.
Right.
So what type of message does that send when that's the type of accountability that is done when, you have a year-long investigation that goes on and this is the outcome? And it also is a problem with who's investigating. If these were a third-party investigation that looks at this, and the CID is supposed to be that, but, as soon as they ruled that this was a natural death, the CID's out. They don't go further into looking at what issues may be going on with policy or procedure, because that's not what the CID's role is for.
Right.
But that's where there needs to be some type of, the IG is there to look into these issues, but a lot of these issues don't get to the IG necessarily, or there's a delay in getting it to them.
So was there an official report, or were all of these reports, quote unquote, unofficial?
These are official reports. So I just emailed you a set of them with them. So you'll be able to take a look at those later as well. But these were the official reports by both the CID and the command that were endorsed through the top. And what's confusing is that how the statements about those that were responsible for checking on Caleb were unable to find records that they called him. The investigator puts that in his notes, that when I asked the person that says I called Caleb on the Friday before and I talked to him, he said he was fine. The investigator notes that he could not find that call log. He didn't know which phone he used, and he got agitated when asked about it.
Right.
These are
also,
the types
but
of
if you
things
also
that,
audited Caleb's phone, there would be an incoming call.
presumably, and they didn't do that. It was Heather that had to show the records that showed there was no call.
Right.
That was made. So, how is it that the mother of the deceased soldier has to do a more thorough investigation when you have the full Army's capacity to investigate thoroughly and do justice by the service member that's passed away? And if this is the type of investigating that's being done across the board in these tragic cases where a young man or woman is deceased on our own soil in a non-combat related scenario, that says it all, is that this isn't true accountability, and we need to be able to have somebody really give it a thorough look. And I think it goes in with what you were saying with opening the door to the courts, because without access to some other entity to review what the military is doing in these cases, it fosters a culture where they don't need to change because they are literally above the law when it comes to negligence issues.
Right. Well, also, no one is ever going to sabotage their own success. And so when I go around and do these, security audits for corporations or, global enterprise or what have you, and I talk to the security director and I say, well, how often has an audit been done? And they say, oh, we do them like every 3 to 6 months. And I say, well, like, what were the findings? And they say, oh, well, we were great. And I say, well, who did them? And he says, well, I did. It's like, okay, well, you're not going to write in a report that you're doing a bad job.
Yeah, you can't be your own jury, judge, and adjudicator.
Right. So you do need someone from the outside, a non-partial, non-biased observer who can come in and say, hey, look, this is what you're doing really well. This is what is right here is a critical concern that needs to be fixed right away. And, here are some other suggested enhancements. But you cannot expect, some, E4, E5 CID investigator to come in and tell a captain he's got to tighten up his ship, because it's preposterous. Like the chain of command is not set up for independent, thought. And so I think go ahead.
Go on. I was just going to say the Vanessa Guillen example, which you mentioned earlier, is a perfect example. When left to their own investigation, there was these findings. However, once taken to an outside, it's completely different.
100%.
That model should be the model that the whole every branch of the military uses to review things, because there's a drastic failure within the investigative arms of the military. Because like you said, you just hit it on the nail on the head with that. The E4 can't tell the captain, you're not doing this right. And if they do, there's repercussions, unfortunately. That's
guaranteed
a scary
repercussions.
thing.
Yeah. Congratulations, pack your bags. You're now serving in Alaska.
Exactly.
No, but I just think it's important. Like, if you do get 90 seconds, 2 minutes with a Colin Powell, with a President Trump, with a President Biden, you're not going to have the luxury of a 45-minute soliloquy. And the more that you can really have, like when people ask me what I do for a living, I help good people make bad things better. I have a consulting firm that helps good people make bad things better. I mean, what is the, how do you what's the elevator pitch? What's the takeaway? What's the drive home? What's the deliverable, so that someone can go, oh, okay, she's hurting and I want to help. Yeah. And she's hurting and she wants to help. And the reason she wants to help is because she doesn't want another mother to feel the pain that she's feeling. You know what I mean? So maybe the takeaway was, I want to see that all non-combat military deaths are investigated by non-military parties, because the military's focus is combat and engagement, and these are clearly not that.
Yeah. So, so I just want to see that these non-combat deaths are investigated by an independent source. We need independent investigations. Leadership needs to be held accountable.
Yeah. And I think that has to come from the outside.
And it has to come from the outside. But
this
like,
was
what outside, there's going to have to be some organization. I don't know if it's a part of the FBI, I don't know. But I would like to know, and I would love to hear if there's anyone out there that.
Well, I think much in the same way that there's civilian oversight for concerns involving sexual assault or sexual abuse in the military, because the military can't be trusted to handle those cases themselves, that Absolutely. Anytime there is a death, a non-combat related death, that there should be some civilian oversight to ensure that everything is being done, that justice is being served, and not, some green blanket
Absolutely.
being put over the facade.
When you say oversight, you mean like being able to plan a scenario before it happens, right? Oversight. Is that what you mean? No,
when I say civilian oversight, I mean that the military is accountable to someone outside of themselves.
That is viewing the situation.
Right. So typically, so there's like a Senate oversight committee that oversees, say, the CIA. There's a Senate oversight committee that oversees the military. Well, for example, like every time the military wants more money, they you see the generals, put on their uniforms, and they go before, the Senate Armed Service Committee, and they say, this is what we want to do. This is, like the military cannot unilaterally declare war.
Right.
Like even the president can't declare war. The president has to go to Congress and ask for a declaration of war. So there is the model is set up so that there is public oversight of the military.
It's
just that in certain cases, the military is just kind of allowed to do its own thing. And clearly they have shown that they're not capable of, and don't get me wrong, like I'm sure that a majority of the time they get it right. But the problem is that how many times are they getting it wrong? And if it's more than once, that's too many.
Just like you said. Yeah. I want to say this one more thing. It's just occurring to me, Caleb's motto was a Latin phrase called, it says, amat victura curum, which means victory loves preparation. So I think auditing, I think that would at least be a really good first start, and at least seeing where these weak links are, so that we can be prepared and be the great nation that we are, lead the right way, lead with integrity and empathy.
So say we all. Heather, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, for sharing your story. If people do want to reach out and get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Well, you can find me on Facebook as Heather Hedge Baker, or you can also reach out to me through email as heather.hedge, hedge.baker@gmail.com.
Right. We'll put those in the show notes as well, so that any interested parties who want to help you to help others can do so. Heather, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And if there's ever anything I can do in the future to help you or your cause,
thank you so much.
Hesitate to reach out.
So much love.
Cheers.